Welcome, filmmakers. Welcome to the Blackmagic Collective's event this month with a DP Sarah Phillips. We're going to get into everything cameras today. I hope you have a lot of questions because we want to get into whatever you want to get into, not what we want to get into. Thanks for being here. We are Blackmagic Collective. We're a collective of film and TV artists and crew. We have events, classes, initiatives, all kinds of things, all for you, all free. Membership is free. All thanks to our sponsor, Blackmagic Design. Right now, at Blackmagic Collective Film Festival, submissions are open. If you have a 5-minute or less short film, please submit it. And you're eligible then to win prizes. And today we have a pick of the month. Last month's pick of the month is going to screen at the end of this day. That film is going to, or end of this event, that film is going to go to the semifinals. And then the finalists will all compete in Los Angeles at our live event in November. What else? Giveaways. We have some cool giveaways today besides our Davinci Resolve studio seat for you. We're also going to be giving away a free entry to the 9th annual Collaboration Filmmaker Challenge. So thanks to them for helping sponsor this and get you guys some free stuff. As you're here, please put questions in the box. We're going to answer them along the way. We are also going to put a link into the comments. That link will get you backstage. So if you're brave enough to come on camera and ask your question, or maybe you have your camera to show and you want to show us what you're looking at and get answers, you want to click that link and you're going to join us. All right. All of that. Hello, I am Jen Page. I'm the executive director of Blackmagic Collective. I am also a director. I've directed 6 feature films, the most recent of which is going to be in theaters this year. So hope you'll come out and see that. And I have done, like many of you, every kind of camera gig. I've been the one-woman show all the way up through, full crews. And there's always questions. I don't care. I've been doing this for a decade and I'm still like, why don't I know how to do this one thing on my camera? That's why we have Sarah here today. So Sarah is, you know what? She's got this long bio that you guys could all read. I would just say that I have personally worked with Sarah and she is a rock star. Like we've had her in a situation where we had a bunch of dance teams or dance groups who came into a location and she had basically her and a first assistant and that's all they had. And they made magic on this video. She's won tons of awards for the work that she's done. Without further ado, Sarah Phillips, hello. I want to say Sarah Phillips Camera, like that's your name.
That's my Instagram, so that's fine.
I love her, but thanks for being here, guys. If Kate Fogarty, writer-director from LA is here. Remember to ask your questions in the box as we go. And Kayla has put up a StreamYard link for you. So again, if you want to join us, open up Chrome or Firefox, click that link, and you'll be backstage. Sarah, so there's a lot of camera questions we could get into. One of my big ones I'm wondering, though, is like, I think a lot of people ask is there something for you when you're starting a project that makes you choose a camera? Or do you just have a favorite camera that you go to?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors that make me choose. I own 3 cameras for a reason. Depends on sort of what the goals of the project are, right? And also like what kind of time we're constrained by or budget. So like I just shot some stuff for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation for the Canadian Women's Beach Volleyball Olympic Champions that are going to Tokyo in a couple of weeks. But they wanted to be like super light on their feet. We were doing a lot of stuff on the beach. And so we shot all of that on the A7S III because it's super easy to have not a huge footprint crew-wise with that camera. Anything narrative, I generally start on an Alexa Mini and work backwards, but I own the Alexa Mini, so that's why. I've owned like a very wide swath of cameras, and they all have kind of different goals. I mean, obviously, like if you're trying to do a lot of VFX, they shoot a ton of stuff on the Red for that because it's a sharper sensor. I could talk for hours about why we should choose different cameras. Like Black Panther, a lot of their VFX was shot on the Red camera because so when you're doing VFX, you have to like be able to track contrast points, right? So the only way to do that efficiently is to have a very sharp sensor versus the Alexa. And I would even say like the Ursa and things like that have a softer sensor Soft is, it's more indicative of like film emulsion, which was the goal for it, which tends to be softer just because it's sort of like a different shape.
I think even at the basics of it, like I own 2 cameras. I own the Ursa Mini G2 and I own the Blackmagic Pocket 6K. And I will tell you, I get out my 6K for everything I shoot because it's just so much easier.
It is easier, and it like, yeah, like the 6K, you can just roll out with like a little tripod and you can just get it done. And then the Ursa, you do need more support. I try to explain that to people. You need a bit more support team when it comes to a bigger camera, even if you're like pulling your own focus, because like with the 6K you can kind of do that, but with the Ursa it's like
yeah, more of a beast.
Yeah.
So our first question has come in from Marion. She says, I'm looking for suggestions on which gimbal would work best on the OG Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera.
Oh, yo, I had that. I owned that camera. Good question, because that camera needs a lot of stabilization. So that's a tiny little thing. It'll have to do more with which lens that you put on it, because it's more of a weight issue. I will say I have recently shot, I owned the Ronin S1, the little guy. I mean, I've shot on so many gimbals, but the Ronin 2, you can pretty much fly anything, the big guy. And then the Ronin S1 I owned, and it was up pretty good, but they just came out with the Ronin S2, and I can fly the A7S III with like a 24-70 and like zoom in and out, which changes your balance center, and it pretty much handles it if you balance it to the center of the zoom. So the Blackmagic for sure. I mean, unless you're like, I can't imagine you'd be flying like a Hawk anamorphic on that little tiny camera, but you know, if it's somewhere in that reasonable range of like, I don't know, like that size of a lens, then yeah, you'd be good with the new Ronin S2, and plus that'll last you a little longer than, although you could probably find the Ronin S1 if you're flying like a pancake lens, like a little 40. You could get away with the Ronin S1 and probably find it for way cheaper too.
Yeah. John Parinto, can you throw up the link to the one that she's recommending, which I think is the one that John actually recommended me to buy for the pocket cam with a couple accessories to make it fit. Also, just so you know, Marlon, we are, and I apologize, I said your name wrong earlier. Eyes are literally blurry today, so everything is backwards, or whatever. Anyway, even my brain can't think. Marlon, we are doing a gimbal class in July. Kayla, if you could throw that date up. So if you really want to learn more, we're going to really get into gimbals and like have a show and tell of setting them up and all that good stuff. So, and then if you buy one, then you can maybe come and be part of our class if you're in LA. Anyway, moving on. So there's a DJI link there for you, Marlon, so that you can see which one she was just talking about mostly. Okay. Anybody else who's here who has questions, by all means, please put them in the box. Or Kayla, if you could put that link up again for them to be able to join us live, that'd be great. So let's just kind of dive into, I guess, the next kind of basic when it comes to camera questions is lenses. I, as a non-cinematographer who just shoots, you know, things I have to survive sometimes, I almost live on my 85 or 50 and a 35. Like I love prime. I'm not a fan of zooms. Do you have something that you kind of live on, unless, you know, obviously when you're making a movie, it dictates a lot different, but you have faves?
I mean, yeah. I mean, you'll find cinematographers have favorite lengths of things, regardless of the type of lens. So like, I really like a 50 for like a lot of stuff. There was kind of this phase, not a phase, but there was kind of this like era where people shot super wide for a long time, where they would be on like a 18 and be like up against your face and see more of the world behind, and less compression of background. And it's super charactery and like quirky, but it's never, I like pretty things. So I've always liked, you know, 50. I mean, an 85 is a little bit like indulgent, I will say, because it's just gorgeous. And it's kind of like cheating, although sometimes you should just cheat and make things beautiful. Like in like date scenes, right? When like someone is supposed to fall in love, you know, in 85, you fall in love.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So I know we'll dive more in and people can have more in-depth questions they can ask. I'm just going to kind of keep going through the basics. But Mel just asked, Mel says, good morning. I'm a director who loves camera and would love to know how to begin to consider the different looks and feels for what each camera would bring to each project. Can you recommend a resource for researching what camera works best and how to understand to choose lenses and augment this? I mean, beyond obviously renting stuff and just getting out there, which I think is the best way, is just putting them on and seeing what you like. Is there resources that you can recommend?
Yeah, there's a ton. The first thing I would say is that, so ShareGrid and Old Fast Glass paired up to do the ultimate lens test a while ago. And that's available. You can look at a bunch of different lens tests online. I think you just Google, I just usually look up ultimate lens test. But they did, they've been working on it over like 3 or 4 years to catalog, and they still don't even have like every lens that exists or every lens that I like, you know what I mean? But they basically, the best way to test a lens, I'm gonna close this window because of the garbage. The garbage truck is here. The best way to test a lens is put a person, you know, kind of 8 feet or so. You can look this up. Actually, Jay Holden writes about this in American Cinematographer, the magazine, if you really want to learn super nerdy shit about cameras. But basically, you put a person 8 feet from the camera, put a bare bulb next to them, and then put some Christmas lights behind. That's like the dumbed down version of it. But then if you change lenses, you can see how the elements and the optical effects sort of change with that, right? So in any kind of scientific, we'll call it a scientific test. Both of my parents are scientists. You want to only change one element, right? So if you're testing lenses, you would have them all in the same camera with the same setup and the same person and lighting and all that stuff. If you want to test cameras, you would flip that and you would have the same pretty like, you would want like a very basic lens, right? Or not basic, but you could say like true to like optics, right? And probably the best one for that would be the Arri Masters, probably. That if you could rent like one Arri Master Prime, like a 35 is considered to be just like what your vision shows. Then you could pop that on some different cameras. And truly, you can go to pretty much any rental house and say, hey, you know, we want to test some cameras. And I mean, most of them will have an Arri Zeiss Master sitting around, you know, or a Zeiss Super Speed you could probably do if it's not the vintage ones. So that's a great way to like test to see how the different cameras have effects on things, right? Because you would then have to take that footage home and make it big on your computer because you won't be able to tell on like a little 5 or 7 inch, right? So on a red, you would see like significantly sharper, like here, see where that like contrast point is behind me? You would see like a sharper contrast point there on a red. On an Arri, you're going to find that the greens are a very specific kind of green that kind of every other camera tries to achieve. So you kind of see these different effects, and then you choose subjectively what you like. Same with lenses. Like none of this is an objective thing. I mean, it's all, you look at it and you go, oh, kind of like that. That's kind of cool. You know, that's sort of how you would test all of that stuff. And then over time, you collect a base knowledge of those things, and you can speak intelligently about why a certain scene might require one thing or another.
And I would say too, Mel, as a director, I was told very often in my early directing career, oh, that's not possible. And then I learned lenses, even just learning lenses and nothing else. And I was like, oh, it's possible. So I think it's important that we directors, we don't have to know it all, because I do love that, like I can work with someone like Sarah and just say, I want this look, and she can give it. But it is also nice to be like, can we try it on a 50 and not have to go, can we try it a little more, you know, here in this frame? So here's
There's
some of the
also
basics.
a great app. Sorry, Jen. There's a great app called, Artemis Pro. And just as far as like choosing lengths and stuff, you plug in your, I mean, every DP has this, how we take pictures on scouts and stuff. So you just plug in that's kind of what it looks like. Oh, look, it's my face. You just plug in
what lens was that?
That's a Cook S5i. I think that's the last thing I shot on. You plug in your camera and what codec and settings and which lenses and things like that, and then you can just swipe between and see, right? So it's like I even use it on set where I'm going to be like, you know, if we're still finding a lot of indie stuff, you're still finding stuff on the day, and so it'll be like, okay, I can tell my first AC to swing to a 40 while we're switching lights. You know what I mean? It's very efficient.
So I want to go through some camera basics. So for those of you who are scared to ask questions, there's no question that's too small or too technical because Sarah can probably answer anything. So reminder, if you want to join us live, there's a link in here, the StreamYard link. You click that in Facebook and Firefox or Chrome, and you'll be backstage and we'll talk to you live. And then also they just put in the link for you for the app, for Artemis app, so you can easily find that. So I want to go through kind of basics of cameras, meaning like, what are the things if I don't really know cameras and I'm just picking it up, I need to know certain things, you know, right? Like ISO, white balance. What are some of the other things you say, these are the basics you need to know about your camera? And then let's go through what those mean.
Yeah. So if we roll it all back, it's all about exposure, right? So you're trying to optimize your exposure to achieve your goals. Most of the time that's to have the least amount of noise and have appropriate exposure so that you have a wide range to play with in post. That's generally what it is. It's not always what sometimes like I'll push my ISO really high for street photography, right? Because you want that like grainy 70s fast feel, right? So if you can imagine exposure as like, I don't know, the best way to explain it is like do you guys play those stupid games on your phones where it's like you have to like make things fit into things? That's kind of what exposure is, where it's like you can't take one piece without giving another piece, if that makes sense. And you're trying to fit it into this space. So you're prioritizing different things. Sometimes you're like, oh no, I definitely need one piece, right? So to break down what those elements are, and the thing is, on every camera, not on every, there's some cameras that you can't customize like white balance, and that's insane, and everyone needs to fix that. Because I've been on set before and they hand me a certain camera that I'm not gonna say it, Jen makes me feel. But and I'm like, you have to like hold a piece of paper. It's like archaic. So anyway, regardless, so we'll go through. So white balance obviously is your color temperature. So like the stuff coming in from my window back here is bluer. So in your camera, that is going to be something closer to the 3,000, 3,200 range. I mean, it's probably like 442 right now. And then over here is an indoor tungsten light, just a little filament. I think it's a filament. Oh yeah, it's like an old school filament bulb. So it's like super warm, right? So if I were to just set my camera to make it feel that color or warmer, I'm going to make that like something like 7,000 or something. And you can play with effects. There's a lot of DPs on Instagram that will show you very nerdy things about how you can do it. But like in a diner, if you set your color temperature super cool, then the whole thing feels like kind of green and icky, and then you like have to put an orange light to fight that blue, right? And then it just feels normal. So these are just like fun little color temperature things. And you can go the other way, or you know, a lot of old school DPs will just set color temperature for what the actual color temperature of white is in the space. And that's this like safer way to do it in post, right? Because then in post, you're like, oh, whatever. I tend to take more risks and back myself into like very exciting visual looks, but you know, find the thing that fits you, I guess. So then ISO is how fast your film is, right? So some of these things are based on actual film emulsion and all of that. I mean, they all are based on that. but they're still named for that, right? So ISO is how fast your film speed. And if you can imagine like taking a picture on a still camera, imagine this was made of film, or any of these cameras up here are film cameras. So imagine you're like taking a picture. It's how fast that emulsion accepts the light, right? So in an old school camera, I mean, your whole roll is like 800 or something, right? But you can change that in digital cameras to be whatever you want for each shot. But basically, like the faster your ISO, aka the higher the number, the faster you can capture an image, which is helpful at night when you don't have a lot of light, or for sports, stuff like that, when things are moving quickly, because how fast your ISO directly affects your shutter speed, right? Now in film, in stills, shutter speed doesn't really matter, right? You can, because you're taking one picture, but in film, your shutter speed is 23.98 or 30 if you're in if you're shooting for digital, or 25 if you're in Europe or the rest of the world besides the United States. So, and the general rule then, shutter speed, right? I'm sorry if this is getting a little dense, but this is what it is. So shutter speed, right? Shutter angle is basically like the angle at which it's shooting, right? So you want it to be, if it's a fraction, it's 1 over double whatever your shutter speed is. So if you're shooting at 24 or 23.976, then it would be 1 over 48, right? Sometimes you can't always get 1 over 48 in like little cameras and stuff, so then you just sort of round up to 1 over 50.
I'll back it up to the filmmaker who's newer and pick up the camera. So when they're setting if they're doing their basic settings, for instance, you know, obviously everything changes based on day, night, whatever. But is there like a basic speed that you run it at, an ISO you try to get at?
Yes. So, good. Pull me in, Jen. So every camera has what's called a native ISO. Some of them have dual native ISOs now, because technology is awesome. But you can just Google what's the native ISO of my camera. Most of the Sonys are 640, Aries 800, which is a pretty fast speed. I mean, like, you know, Roger Deakins talks about how he had to shoot at night with 150 ISO film. And that's like you have to like blow light in to get any exposure. So, so you just can Google what your native ISO is. It would be great if you stay at the native ISO, because that's where the least noise is, as the manufacturer created it.
So for those who are newer, that would mean if you say your native ISO is 800 and it's still dark, now you're adding outside light instead of doing what a lot of newer filmmakers do and keep cranking up the ISO until eventually it's grainy and pretty much unusable.
I mean, truly, like if your native ISO is 800 and you go up to 1,000, that's introducing a lot of grain already. There are some cameras that do it better than others, but there's kind of a little give and take there too, right? If your camera's amazing at night, it's probably not the best one during the day, right? So so that's why you pick the camera based on the project. If you know you're shooting all at night, you want to pick something that's better with night exposure. Anyway, so yeah, native ISO. And then generally, if you're in the United States, you're going to set your shutter speed to 23.976. Some of them, it doesn't say that because they're a little prosumery. So you just set it like the A7S III. It doesn't say 23.976 because I think they think it would freak people out, but you set it to 24 and it is truly 23.976. Same with like DJI drones. I don't know why they didn't just put whatever, but I think it just overwhelms people. So, so that, and then your shutter angle is the same. It's the same thing, shutter angle and shutter speeds, shutter fraction. It's 1 over 48 or 180 degrees. It's easier to just set it to 180 degrees, because then if you change your shutter or change your frame rate to like 48, for example, it'll just automatically fix your angle for you. It's a lot easier that way.
Okay, so I keep losing my earpiece here Today is a weird day. So I would love to dive into some of your actual work. And then you can maybe talk to them about the basics of what it took to achieve that look.
Yeah. Oh, let me, sorry. You've also, for exposure, you've got lenses too. So that's a huge part of that. So we can talk about lenses later because it's going to be, but how wide open your lenses go, the wider open, the more light comes in. It's all about controlling how much light is coming into your camera at the end of the day.
People always ask too, I think when a new filmmaker, when it comes to that, is everybody wants the bokeh. And with that blurry background, that's trying to open up the lens more.
Yeah.
Which then gives more light, which then you got to figure out how to take light off of your human face if they're a white bounce board themselves.
Unless it's at night, and then it's great. Yeah, I mean, you also run into, if you're say you have like a super fast lens, right? Like I'm gearing up to shoot something that's like almost all at night. I think it's like overnights. But we're gonna have to have super fast lenses because they don't have a budget to get a 3-ton truck, you know what I mean? So the problem with shooting wide open, which everybody loves to do because it's like everything falls off in the background, is that your the focal plane, there's an app for this too if you really want, but there's a focal plane where it's like if you're wide open, that gets super little, right? So it's really hard to keep anything in focus. So you have to have like the best first AC of all time if you are going to shoot wide open. If you shoot at something closer to like a 2.8 or a 4, no matter how fast your lenses are, now that gets you to have maybe like 1.5 feet of focal plane, right? It's a lot easier to keep your people in focus. Not to mention, like most top films don't shoot wide open. So if you want it to look like Hollywood films, like they shoot around a 4 generally because you get enough background. Like I've shot some commercials where they want to shoot wide open and it looks like we're on a green screen because everything is so out of focus that it's like, what's the point, of even getting something super cool?
Yeah. Mel asked, I'm assuming that's what you would, as to what you were just talking, that's how they shoot Handmaid's Tale, correct?
Yeah, some of their stuff when they're like super close to people, it can also have like an isolating effect, which is I think why they do it that way. Because Reed Morano set the look on that, and that's the vintage K35 lenses and Alexa Mini. They wanted them to feel super isolated. And that's one way to achieve that. But again, that would be like, here's a story goal we have. How can we achieve that optically instead of being like, let's just shoot it everything wide open because it's pretty, So it can there's a couple of films that do a really good job with that as well, where they shoot and then they'll rack a bunch, they'll rack focus from just this plane where it's just you in your own world, and then rack to somebody else whenever they get broken out of that dream state, right? So, but yes, that's accurate about Handmaid's Tale. But they don't shoot everything wide open, just those like iconic, close-up stuff.
Jack asks, how do you achieve an anamorphic look?
Well, there's a lot of ways to do it nowadays. The true answer is you shoot on anamorphic lenses. Let's talk about anamorphic lenses. So, anamorphic lenses, this is, y'all, you're going to get a history lesson here. So, back in the day, it was all spherical, right? We're shooting on film, and it's like a 4x3 little square of film. Well, then in cinemas, they wanted to get a wider perspective, but film was still this big. So they were like, what are we going to do? So somebody invented, I wish I knew who it was because this would be helpful right now. But someone invented lenses that are shaped like an oval so that they optically squish a super wide frame, 2.39 generally if it's a 2x, into a square. And then on the other side, when you're projecting it, they have another oval projector lens that de-squeezes it, right? So this is back in the day with film. So now, basically in the early 90s, at the dawn of the whole digital, well, no, it'd be late 90s, I guess. Whenever Arri was starting to get into digital stuff, and Canon did the 5D in like 99, I think. So back in that day, some DPs were digging around in Panavision's, back closet and found a bunch of old anamorphics, because they couldn't, it got to the point where film got wider, right? And then you've got like large format, or you've got 65 or whatever. So it got to be a different situation, because you could project like a large format lens onto a 65 and have the image circle cover all of that. So then they found these anamorphic lenses, and they're like, oh, we're doing something with this. So digitally, now they have, at the time, you would come in with this squished footage, and you had to figure out digitally how to squish it out. And for a while, it didn't look super awesome, because obviously on film, like that, it all fills in whenever you're on a projector versus digital. So, but then now they have algorithms for that. So that's now it's, you just set in your area, you're like, oh, I'm on an anamorphic lens, and then it does it. Blackmagic has it too on the Ursa. You just go, I'm on an anamorphic, and it's like, great, we'll just de-squeeze it so that you can watch it on this screen the way that you would see it. But back in the day, they had to watch it like squeezed and like have intelligent feelings about whether it was good or not, which is insane. So anyway, that's anamorphic. So now there's also,
so if you're like an indie filmmaker and you want to create an anamorphic look, so maybe you're making your own little sci-fi film.
Mm-hmm. There's a few ways to do it. So let me also just say that an anamorphic lens is two optical elements. So you have what's called the taking lens, which is like a K35 or something. And then you have the anamorphic element, and that's the squeezy part, right? So whenever anamorphics got cool again, people would just take an anamorphic element and put it on the front of any spherical lens. And that still now, those front guys still exist. People are making them brand new. It becomes very complicated though, because you have to focus both of those lenses, right, at the same time, which is why you really, if you're going to shoot anamorphic, you want a rehoused one, because you can find, those kind where you have to focus both at the same time, which is a nearly impossible feat. But it'll wreck your whole shoot. There's just not even a point. So now, additionally, the thing people love about anamorphic optically is the shape of the bokeh, which is an oval, and the flare that goes across with a bare bulb, right? The flare became like sexier in the 90s, and the bokeh, bokeh people are I've just learned this actually. That's from an old Japanese phrase because we didn't in English have the word bokeh. Anyway, that's American cinematographer language right there. I just read about that. So the what they have now so the bokeh is shaped by the shape of your iris. Your iris is what controls your f-stop, which opens and closes the lens, right, on the inside. So that shape is created by how many blades are in that iris. So if you've got 15 blades, you get a near perfect circle. If you've got, I don't know how many blades this has, but you can watch it as it closes, you know what I mean, as you're opening and closing a lens. So if you've got like 3 blades, I think the Zeiss Super Speeds have 3 blades, you get like a triangle. And I've got a still to show you guys that, but you get like a triangle bokeh. And as you close down, that bokeh changes shape, right? So there's some where it's like, if you're wide open on pretty much any lens, it's always going to be a circle. If you start to close down, the different ones have different shapes. Like there's one that kind of looks like a sunburst and a flower triangle, whatever. So this cinematic look is a perfect circle, but some vintage nerds like myself like different bokeh. So the anamorphic bokeh is an oval. So now they have, sorry, I had to walk you through this whole thing to explain why this exists. So now they have a front element that will just, it basically creates an oval bokeh, an oval iris for you. So it's like faking the anamorphic bokeh, right? Does that make sense now that you understand like how a bokeh is made? So, and then there's also like, you can do effects in like, I think Resolve has an anamorphic effect where it'll give you flares on like every sort of bright point of light that it sees in your shot, which we used. Actually, an editor really liked it on this musical that I shot last summer, but we had to mat some of them out because it got a little aggressive with that effect. You know.
Well, let's show up some of your work and talk through some of those things in our time we have left. Up to you if you want to do photos or videos first.
Let's do the stills. Let's do the stills. So this is a musical poem that I shot with director Kristen Hange out of New York. And these are Zeiss Super Speeds. That's Monique Coleman from High School Musical. So you can see, I mean, we were shooting like at dawn. So you can see like how shallow that depth of field is because I didn't have any lights. We were on the beach. Is this changing? There we go. So you can also see like there's not a lot of like optical aberration. It's pretty clear as far as like any kind of weirdness goes, and the contrast is nice too. The other thing, I mean, just to consider also is I always shoot with a LUT on. I choose a different LUT for every project. So a LUT is it stands for lookup table, and it essentially is like this color equals this color, right? It's an algorithm. So it's very similar to like putting an Instagram filter on, right? Except way more in depth with bits. So Zeiss Super Speed. So here's that triangle bokeh I was talking about. You can see how I was closed down. Now here we were in bright sun, right? So I was closed down to probably a 4, 5, 6, something like that. And you can see how if I had been wide open, which I was here, I don't know if you can see any of but you can see how like everything in the background is way softer here versus when I was closed down a little bit. You can get all of this like fun triangle stuff. And then this, we were also in the middle of the night. This was actually indoors, also on Zeiss Super Speeds. So Zeiss Super Speeds are super great for, they're vintage glass, but they're very fast. So they're phenomenal for anything at night, spherical lenses. But they also don't add a whole lot of what you would call like interesting vintage weirdness, funky stuff, you know? But I shot a feature on Zeiss Super. They're quite affordable as well, I should say. So that factors in. If you want like a vintage lens that's somewhat affordable, Zeiss Super Speeds is probably the way for you to go. Now, this was a Subaru spec that I shot. And these are on Cook anamorphic eyes. So anytime on a Cook lens you see the eye, that means interactive. So it'll send lens data. Any kind of lens will have like some kind of marker showing you whether it's a smart lens or a stupid lens. Vintage lenses are stupid lenses because computers didn't exist in a very public way at the time. So, but modern lenses will send through the basic information of like what f-stop you're at or t-stop in cinema. So in still lenses, it's f-stop. In cinema lenses, it's t-stop. I don't know why. It's the same thing, but that's the difference. So I shot a Saweetie music video recently, and this was on the Alexa Mini, and I have a set of vintage Canon FD lenses, which are about the closest thing you can get to K35s that you can find. I mean, K35s are like the sexiest vintage lens that exists. Like you can't rent them right now. They're all rented out on shows for years right now. So this is about as close as you can get. So you can see though, the thing everyone loves about K35s and thusly FDs are, do you see the bokeh in the background here? It's called an onion. It's called an onion bokeh. And you can see how you get a little onion pattern, and it's the only way you can describe it. But the difference, there's very little difference between specific Canon FD lenses and the K35s. They use the exact same optics. They just have fewer blades in the iris, and the 24, the 55, and the 85 are the exact same lens, just with different irises. So this is the 85, which of course is beautiful and I'm obsessed with.
Is that a lot of that photo there? Is there a lot of post color done on that, or is that
no,
pretty much?
No. So you can see here in the slightly wider, we had these Astera tubes, and then in the back right here, I have an Aperture 300D with a gel on it, and then we had fog to pick some stuff up. You can see here inside this window, I have just a little 1x1 LED panel that's RGB, so I set it to blue, just to sort of have a little contrast there. So, and then we had a couple fill LED panels in front of her to give her some nice stuff. But yeah, no, there's no. I mean, I just have my LUT on it. That's it. This is the LUT I shot with. So
on the note of LUT, Kate would like to know, how do you pick the LUT you use in day of, in advance? What goes into your thought process?
That's an excellent question. So it's a whole thing. So with the Alexa, they have what's called a look library that you buy, and it's like on a little USB, and you put it into your camera and load it up. So there's a bunch of different looks that they have preset. I can make looks too, but their looks are pretty good. So when I owned the Ursa, the Blackmagic Ursa, I would make LUTs in Davinci Resolve. So I would basically, the ideal situation is you would go and shoot some test footage, bring it back to your computer, make a LUT, put it on your camera, shoot with it on the day. There's not always that amount of time, or if you're shooting on location, it's not always possible because you like get there, and I shoot a lot on location. So I made when I shot on the Ursa, I made a bunch of LUTs that I just liked based on other films that I liked. So then I would get to set, and either on the Scout or whatever, I would roll those in to sort of see which ones I liked. And then I try to keep it to 1 or 2 LUTs for the length of a film, because otherwise it gets a little complicated. So with the Alexa, I'll go on, they have like an app where they've like taken a picture of a landscape, a car, and a woman. And so you can kind of say like, okay, I know that we're going to be in a forest, so I know I want the greens to be true green or slightly teal, right? So then I can look at the landscape and see in the trees which one has like the kind of green I'm looking for. And then I'll pick like 3 and I'll write them down in my notes app. And then when I get to set, I'll try each of those 3 and pick which one of those 3 I like. But there's a lot of them, so you kind of have to do a little prep work in advance. And then if there's on really bigger shoots like features or big commercials, you'll go in with your colorist in advance, right? So you would go shoot test footage or whatever, Scout footage and stuff, and then you would take that footage to your colorist, and they would create different whatever LUTs for whatever you want, or you just make one shooting LUT, and then your DIT or your AC or whatever will load those in appropriately, like as you're moving through a shoot. So that's like the big budget version.
Let's go into some of your video so that we can show some of the movement and how all of this stuff comes together.
Sure. Yeah, so these are vintage CineoVision anamorphic lenses. I think that's a Rokinon. No, sorry, those are Canons. Those are CineoVisions. These are Zeiss Super Speeds. Those are CineoVision. All this period film is CineoVisions. Those are Canon. I think those are Rokinons. Zeiss Super Speeds. Canon. Cinema lenses.
Let's pause for a second.
Sure.
So for those of you who are newly investing in cameras and lenses, I highly recommend Rokinons. So affordable, gorgeous, especially for the price, and very just practical. It's like, because they're, around $300 a lens, it's something you can actually get a couple of.
Yeah, I still have the 100 macro I call them Rokies, but they're phenomenal lenses for starting, because you actually get an idea of what a cinema lens is, and they're very clean lenses. Yeah, so this little, it was like a little ad for a real estate company. These are Rokinons with a LUT, with a Blackmagic.
Mel would like to know why you talk about why you select a LUT instead of shooting in log. I will say I hate when DP shoot in log, because I need to see the color, and I don't know if that's a big reason that you do it, Sarah, just for your clients, your directors.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll tell you. So I used to shoot. Well, now let's clarify. So I do shoot in log. Like the footage is in log, that's being recorded, but I put a LUT on the monitor, partially for the director and producer. As a DP personally, when you meet DPs that have been doing it for a while, we kind of have PTSD about things that have happened to us. So I will put that LUT on so that people get used to the color that I prefer.
Like it.
So that when they get into the edit, they do that instead of something that is less good. So that's the reason.
On that note, you need to color correct your stuff. Like, I know a lot of filmmakers, even like I've directed films where the producers did not care about the product. They just wanted the money. And they literally did not let us color correct films. And it's painful. Yeah.
Yeah. There's an amazing colorist. Her name's Persephone. She's at Neptune Post. She's very affordable and an amazing human. Anyway, so yeah, so I will put a LUT on for that reason. Also because a LUT, if you shoot in log, you're shooting the most basic, boring, we exposed it right version, right? With a LUT, you can, if you make an intelligent choice about that LUT with the story, then you can back yourself into that look on the day, right? As opposed to having to do it in color. So if you, for example, have like a very shadowy scene and you have your LUT on and you know how dark it's going to push those shadows, then you can walk yourself right up to that line of what you want the shadows to look like. Do you want any kind of movement in there? Do you want any kind of, exposure? You can still, I still toggle between, I have my little exposure tools and I'll toggle between log and with the LUT on and all that stuff to make sure it's like still technically exposed correctly. But you can push yourself in the direction that you want it to end up as, right? Plus then the colorist in the metadata has the LUT that you shot with, right? And also the editor can just toggle that on. So whenever your people, again, to like get people used to the look that you think is the best look, people get used to that look when they're getting dailies. They're not getting dailies in log, right? So you can always like fiddle with it later, but it gets to the point where like you can make it look awesome from the beginning.
Zachy says, Sarah, your stuff is beautiful. If you're still non-union, she's going to be calling you.
I am still non-union. That's a whole nother conversation about
non-union, but very busy.
Maybe by the end of the year, I'll be 600. Depends on how they feel about a lot of their days count based on if your things are distributed or not yet. And my things, I shoot a lot of indie. It takes longer to get distributed. That's all I'll say about that. Continuing on.
I'll add and say that's dumb. Okay. So Mel, we actually had an issue with what we shot when we shot my USC thesis film. I wanted our final to be much more shadowy and tonal, but we had to do a lot in post with color to make that happen. I'm learning so much here. Thank you. Oh, I love that, Mel. That's great. So I really have maybe about 5 minutes left. So I would love to go through a little more of your work and your videos just so people can see it and maybe talk about anything that comes to mind as far as like why maybe you chose a camera or if there's an interesting lighting situation you want to talk about. So,
well, can I just show a still really quick?
Yeah, of course.
So let me show you. I just shot this, I don't know, like 3 weeks ago. So this is, it's a short film. It's like an action short. And they didn't really care what we shot on, but I knew we had a lot of like sort of night stuff, right? And I wanted fast lenses. And I love personally Cook lenses, pretty much any kind of Cook lens, you can't go wrong. So now there's different applications for everything, but I can show you. So these are the Cook S5Is, and they are the fastest of the modern Cook S series, right? There's like Cook S7s and Cook S4s and Cook S4 minis and all this stuff. But these are the fastest ones. Most of the other ones, Cook tends to run closer to the 2.3 range. These were closer to like a 1.4, 1.5. So you can kind of see this fun flare, right? And Cook to me tends to go, so I just love shooting on Cook. So if people are like, I don't know what to shoot on, I'll probably just be like, we should shoot on something Cook. Unless, you know, we're being hemmed in by certain parameters of the shoot. So you can see though, this fun, super fun, like flare coming in. So it's this is literally just off of this practical on the motorcycle. So you can see how it like changes and blooms. I wish I had the full clip, but they literally just shot it 3 weeks ago. But you can see also how this is coming in off of the street lamp over here. I mean, these are fast lenses, so we were able to open up to have enough exposure with minimal lighting. I think we had like a couple of Astera tubes and a couple of panels, so it wasn't a ton of stuff. But we were never all the way wide open at 1.4. We mostly lived at like a 2. So that's the Alexa Mini with Cook S5Is. And now let's look at some Lomos. So these are vintage Lomos. Lomos are a Russian lens. These are the spherical Lomos. They also have anamorphic. So if they say there's like spherical Lomos and anamorphic Lomos, basically the taking lens is the Lomo, and then the anamorphic element would be something else, right? Because all sorts of people made anamorphic elements. But you can see the bloom here on the Lomos on the right there from also a practical bare bulb. You're always going to get that off of a bare bulb. But you can also see here, we were wide open here. Now look at that bokeh. Oh no, see, we're not all the way wide open here on the Lomos. Now look at that bokeh in the back. So we had to be ever so slightly closed down. And that's, I think they call it like a flower bokeh because it looks like petals. Isn't that kind of cool? Right. And then here we are wide open on the same lenses with the Lomos. So you can see how that bokeh changes.
Now, in a shot like this, what do you like? Because I look at it, I go, "Wow, is that going to be too dark?" Because the background is gorgeous, and I can see a little bit of what I'm trying to see. How do you know where you can push the limits?
You toggle your exposure tool on and off. I push the limits sometimes. I will say the Davinci Resolve denoising tool has saved me a couple of times, because in post you can bump it up a little bit, and then if you put the denoiser on, that'll save you a little bit if you accidentally went a little too dark. But I generally expose off of log, right? So I'll throw the LUT on, but I check my exposure on log to make sure that we still have all of the data and we're not losing anything on the dark end, basically. Unless you want to lose stuff. Sometimes you have to sacrifice if you're like if you have a wide gamut of exposure. Sometimes you're like, are we exposing for the highlights or the shadows? Because you're going to lose one of them. So those are Lomos. Lomos are super fun to shoot with. These are vintage Cook Pancros. This is that musical that I shot. And Cook Pancros are 2.3, right? So they're not super fast, but we had some bunch of bright lights back there. Also Pancros. You saw the Canon FDs. So this is a thing sometimes you can do. I shot this for a show that's not out yet that I'm not technically allowed to talk about. So it's a fashion video, and those were on Cook Anamorphics as well. But you can see here, this is with nothing in front of the lens, but the director wanted to play with something called daguerreotype, which is an old metal print from the 1800s. So I wanted to put stuff in front of the lens. So I now have a grab bag of random glass pieces that you can just sort of shove in front of the lens, right? So that's one of them. And then you can also see here, I mean, that's literally just like a filament bulb that I put in front of the lens, you know? But you can get there's also companies that make things that you could put in front of the lens, but anything that's made out of glass, you can just put in front of the lens and it looks kind of cool.
We have to wrap up.
Yeah.
So I will say to wrap, let's maybe say, what is maybe your best advice for newer filmmakers who, you know, they've got their camera now, they've got their lens, when they're thinking about doing their 1-person, 2-person crew shoots that you and I hope we never have to do again. The shoots you always have to do when you're starting out. What is sort of your thoughts on like the things they should consider making sure they have in their kit, quote unquote, to get by?
Well, you'll never go wrong if you have ND filters, because ND it's called neutral density filters. And if you're in bright sun, if you want to keep your T-stop down, you're going to need that, because it decreases the amount of light that comes in without affecting your image if you get a decent ND filter. So that allows you to keep your T-stop at like a 2.8, as opposed to having to go up to an 11 or 16, and then everything's in focus in your whole thing, and you may as well shoot on your iPhone. I would say the biggest thing truly, like at the end of the day, was like the things that I learned and have seen people affected by with the quality is time and preparation. Those are the two things that go out the wayside, because one person is doing 57 jobs. So, which you have to do. I mean, Jen, you know, I know, you got to do it, because the only way to learn is to shoot. And then you're like, it didn't work out so good. Can I save that? Do I have to reshoot that?
We all have stuff. I was going through all of my projects recently, because I wanted to put them all on one drive instead of like the 6 they were on. And I remember thinking something I shot at one point that it was so good. Like, oh my God. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is complete crap. I can't believe I ever let this be out in the world.
But that's
so you really do have to keep shoot. Absolutely.
You just have to keep shooting. And then you watch your shit. And then it gets into a film festival and you see what block it's in. And then you see all the other stuff that got programmed with it. And you're like, wow, I got a ways to go here. What's going on? Like, but you have to be, fix yourself. But the two things, prep and time, like don't try to fit 13 pages into one day. Shoot something or write something that you can shoot over a week because you have the location for free or something. Like the difference will be made in your performance and the time. Like if you just what they call spray and pray and hope that you get a good story, it's not going to be better than all the other people you're competing with at a film festival. You have to plan your shots and come up with something interesting. And the only way to do that is with time and preparation.
And that's a whole nother prep is a whole nother series we need to have. We can have a week on it. Sarah, thank you so much. This has been an incredible wealth of knowledge. I'm sure that people are going to be rewinding and watching to absorb it all. So thank you for joining us. And I hope you'll come and do some more of these little tech talks of yours.
Of course. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Everybody else, stick around because we have the pick of the month. It's a under 5-minute short film and it's super adorable. And it just lit me up when I watched it. Just beams of light. So stick around for the end of the, and we're going to get to that. But really quick, our next event is Lights, Camera, Action, Filming Sports. So if you have been interested in getting into sports videography, yeah, someone needs a nap or something. July 15th at 11 a.m. right here, you will find that. Remember to submit your 5-minute or less short films to the Blackmagic Collective Film Festival. It's free, and there's huge prizes. We're talking cash, cameras, all that good stuff. Like and follow us on socials to get updates, but please also join our new Facebook group where we can ask all these tech questions of each other and talk and, break it down, whatever we want, including really silly filmmaker memes. What else? Thank you to our sponsor, Blackmagic Design. You always take good care of us and make sure that we can do these events for free, as well as all of our initiatives for free. So on that note, we have 2 new initiatives. Applications open on Friday. New filmmakers. This one is for you. It's 8 months of just free training, meeting mentors, working with actors, filming stuff. There's so much good stuff for you. And then another one, which is brand new for Blackmagic Collective to do, is an emerging actors initiative. So for all of you actors who have got the chops, you've got a really great body of work, but you haven't gotten that first network credit, it's going to be an 8-month program for you to help you break through some doors as well. You guys will work together. The new filmmakers and the emerging actors are going to work together. So it all is going to be fun, and 8 months of just infinite amounts of meetings and knowledge and all that good stuff. Okay. Winners announced. We have 2 winners. I'm hoping that we have those written in here by the Oz behind the great and powerful Oz, John Printo, who runs all this tech. He's from Blackmagic Design. He's our chairman of the board for Blackmagic Collective. And it looks like our first winner of Resolve Davinci is Mel, which is great because you asked so many questions. I love that. So we will be in touch with you on how to get your seat of Davinci Resolve. And then we have one more winner coming up for our the 9th annual Filmmaker Collaboration Challenge. You're going to get a free entry to that. As that winner comes up, I guess I will also thank you, audience, for sticking around for all of this. I'm really excited to bring you this new pick of the month. It's pick of the month for May. They are going on to the semifinalists. Good luck to them getting to the finals, which will screen in November in Los Angeles. The second winner is Jack Cross. You got the filmmaker collaboration thing. We'll be in touch with you. Okay, here we go. So the film pick of the month in May is called Final Destination. Is created by Marika Tamura. Oh my gosh, Marika, I'm sorry if I just butchered your name, but I'm very, very excited that you guys are going to watch this. It is so if you need a happy boost, here it is for you. And then I'll see you in 2 weeks.
In here? Oh, you need to ditch this vanilla room. I'm here to show you a better place to die.
In fact, a perfect location. Check out our fabulous suicide tour. Golden Gate Bridge, 700-foot drop to immediate death.
Oh, imagine the mark you'll make.
Oh, too domestic?
All right, let's go international.
Tour Eiffel.
Un mort tragique et très sexy en France. Ooh, you don't like height. Okay then, how about
Siberia.
ooh, minus 80 degrees? Die of hypothermia. Oh, cold isn't your thing. How about
Immolation.
drowning at Niagara? Eh? Eaten by a shark? Crushed by Big Ben? New York, Egypt, seppuku? How about Rocky Railway? Beautiful, majestic, breathtaking. You ready? Just imagine the splat. Here we go! Here we go! No, I don't want to die!
No. I want to live. I think I want to see the world.
Oh, well, if you change your mind, call me anytime.
Thank you.
Have a good life.